First, there's nothing as depressing in our wonderful towns and cities than meaningless and random acts of vandalism. Graffiti sprayed on this or that building, smashed windows, broken public amenities. But unfortunately, vandalism is part of modern life, an expression of nihilism, envy, political grievances, or just sheer boredom. Vandalizing buildings is one thing, but vandalizing the cornerstones and foundations of our entire system of government is 1,000 times worse. And that is precisely what you and I are being asked to do if we vote yes to the otherwise reasonable proposal for a preamble that has been trashed by Anthony Albanese. We are being asked to vote for the deliberate vandalism and desecration of the Constitution of Australia if we vote yes to Anthony Albanese's Voice to the Australian Parliament. The whole voice, the whole Indigenous voice concept, proposal and soon-to-be referendum is fundamentally and irredeemably racist. But let's put that to one side, shall we? Thanks to 3 sentences designed by Anthony Albanese and his team, the Indigenous voice, it is now being argued by people of eminently qualified legal backgrounds, will go like a wrecking ball through the foundations of our Constitution. The damage from a legal perspective could be insurmountable. Janet Albertson is chair of the Institute of Public Affairs, who previously taught at the University of Sydney Law School. Readers of the Australian newspaper will know her as one of their best columnists. She has written several articles forensically diagnosing the way that Anthony Albanese himself, by constructing the 3 critical sentences that the referendum will be built upon, has seriously damaged the voice proposal by creating the potential for enormous constitutional chaos. I quote from Janet, "Now that the Prime Minister has revealed the words proposed to be inserted into the Constitution to establish the voice, which she, Janet, calls the Albanese Amendment, it is increasingly certain," she says, "that the voice will be a disaster as a matter of practical politics and governance. It turns Australia into a constitutionally endorsed 2-tier society. Importantly, there will be endless opportunities," says Janet, "for paralysing Parliament and executive government when members of the voice head to the High Court." She also writes, quote, "The practical significance of all this is that it creates massive opportunities for litigation and lawfare. Activists who are members of the voice will have leverage over Parliament that previously they and we never imagined was possible." I'll go on, she quotes, "The voice will create constant opportunities for a tiny minority of activists to hold Parliament and executive government to ransom by using the immense opportunities for lawfare carefully woven into the Albanese Amendment." She says, "It is no exaggeration to say the voice will cause the end of parliamentary democracy as we have known it." She calls what Albanese has done a dereliction to the nation. Louise Clegg, a barrister specialising in public law and employment law. She wrote brilliantly in The Australian this morning, again focusing specifically on the so-called Albanese Amendment, the ill-thought-through 3 sentences and what they mean from a legal perspective. Louise writes, quote, "The word voice is being used in the sense of attribution of political opinion or attitude, with emotive undertones. It does not sit comfortably with the language or cadence of our technocratic constitution. Nothing even close to it exists," says Louise, "in any other written liberal democratic constitution." Don't say you haven't been warned. The Voice, Louise warns, either applies to laws and policies of general application or it does not. And she argues persuasively that by extending the reach of the Voice to matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island peoples, quote unquote, it arguably extends its reach to pretty much everything. Professor David Flint, an expert in constitutional law, also agrees, writing in his weekly column in The Spectator Australia, that as to the Constitution, the greatest danger is that the Voice clauses will provide a series of blank checks, and not only to the politicians. This is, of course, what both John Howard and Tony Abbott have warned about. They had their preference was for a simple set of words, a preamble that would recognise the historical presence of Indigenous Australians without vandalising the Constitution itself. Tony Abbott also suggested the preamble should encompass the three great strands of Australian history: Indigenous history, colonial settler history, and immigration history. James Allen is the Garrick Professor of Law at the University of Queensland and a renowned expert in constitutional law. He too has a regular column in The Spectator Australia where he wrote recently, in light of a previous decision made by the High Court of Australia, that, quote, he, James, pointed out that the majority of High Court justices in the Love case relied on, quote, a litany of woke identity politics and platitudes for just a sampling note that the majority justices found their decisions on such stalwart constitutional law concepts as, wait for it, this is what the High Court used to decide the case, otherness, deeper truths, spiritual and metaphysical connections to the land, that Indigenous peoples can and do possess certain rights not possessed by non-Indigenous peoples. And so he goes on. That is what the High Court will be able to use if the Voice goes ahead. And James Allen concludes that the decision of the Albanese government to pull a review of that case, quote, exemplifies just how much the political, judicial and lawyer elite castes can treat the Constitution as their plaything if they wish. Giving judges a blank check is fraught with danger. So there you have it. In my opinion, if you vote yes to the Voice, you risk smashing a wrecking ball through the Constitution of Australia that has served all Australians so well for over 100 years. Even the vandals never did that much damage.